Welcome everyone to the Securing Jira webinar. Thank you for coming. In many companies, as Jira becomes heavily used, people start to store sensitive data in it, be it employee contracts, developed features, personal information, or various configuration details. Jira is prepared to handle the containment of these data with a large number of security settings, ranging from simple on-off settings to convoluted mechanisms. However, for security to work optimally in Jira, a certain level of governance must be also established. The tools can never solve the problem on their own. In this webinar, we will be uncovering what these tools are and what can you achieve with them, along with some good tips on how to establish good governance to ensure better security. The knowledge of the tools and governance practices should suffice for you to make an informed decision when configuring your Jira. So first, some introductions. My name is Kamil Ber, I come from Prague, and I've been working in the Atlassian field from 2014. In Idelco, I'm holding webinars and writing articles about Atlassian tools. My specialty and focus are cleaning up cluttered Jiras and Confluences and setting usage standards and governance to stabilize Atlassian applications. Along with me here is Manuel Patin. Manuel, could you please take a minute to introduce yourself? Thank you, Manuel, for the introduction.
Camille. I will be more kind of the sidekick of Camille today. I'm not a technical sidekick, but I will try to respond to the maximum of your questions in the chat today. So if anybody has questions in the meanwhile, I will try to do my utmost best to respond. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much.
So, as Manuel said, our roles will be twofold. I will be presenting today's content, and Manuel will answer the questions that you, the viewers, will have during the talk. If they become too technical, then I'll be happy to answer them in small pauses between the topics. So, the purpose of this webinar is to introduce the steps with which you can secure Jira and what tools you can use to do so you can start implementing it yourself. We don't want to say that you will learn best practices here, as there are no best practices without context, but what we want to do instead is to provide recommendations for certain situations, like what to do and what not to do. So first, we will go over what exactly counts as sensitive data and which Jira use cases may require you to focus more on security or reconsider it. Then, we will focus on each of the tools that we have in Jira that ensure security, like permission schemes, global permissions, issue level security, field level security, and some others. And even though you might know all of these tools, this is not supposed to be like a tutorial, but we will cover the areas that might not be as apparent or obvious when you are using each of these tools. The last part will be about governance standards that you can establish to ensure security not only in Jira, but in other Atlassian applications that you run. However, we do not want this to be a one-way lecture, but more of a workshop. What this means is that if you have any questions or comments, please write them down in chat. We will be answering throughout the course as we stated before. That said, it's been proven that the more you ask and the more you engage, the more will you get from the webinar. So don't hesitate and let us know if you have something in your mind during the course. Any questions, ideas, comments, whatever comes up. As for the length, then the webinar should take somewhere around 40 to 60 minutes the most, based on the feedback and questions that we will receive. But first of all, a question for you. So why have you decided to come to our webinar? Why are you here? Why have you decided to attend a webinar about security in Jira? Let us know in chat, please. All right, so here's a question by Louis, whether is it possible to apply various security levels in other Jira apps like Portfolio and Structure? Well, many or most of the apps that are somewhat complex or robust, like Structure for Jira, as you're mentioning, many times have their own security sets. For example, in Structure, you can choose who will be able to manage the structures, who will be able to synchronize them, and so on. And while there's so many add-ons with these settings that they would fill a whole webinar, then even though there's so many, the best bet would be to consult it with the tools or add-ons documentation, because the permissions and rights there might vary a lot between the tools. For example, Big Picture might not have the same set of permissions as, let's say, Tempo Planner. So it's better to consult the documentation of the tool itself. There's also a message by Thomas. More of a comment or question. I'm curious if you can surprise me with something interesting regarding security of Jira. That's the idea. We do not want to cover things that are in the documentation. We don't want to say a tutorial that's like, so if you add create issues permission to a permission scheme, then your users will be able to create issues. No, the idea is to present the less obvious examples that you can work with in regards to Jira security. So there's plenty of comments over here. I'll go through the last random one. Let's say, what security measures should be taken on Jira Server when migrating to Jira Cloud? That's a great question, because the security schemes and global permissions do differ a lot. This webinar is mainly focused on cloud. However, wherever possible or where applicable, we will also talk about server/data center security measures. Most of them are the same, but there are some differences. Right. Let's move on. And if there are any other questions, then Manuel, if you could please, I'll progress through the webinar. Thanks for all of your replies, guys. So let's dive right into the topic. We'll begin with the first point, and that's the concept of security in Jira itself. So what are exactly the sensitive data? Where exactly could sensitive data be stored in Jira, and what are the means of protecting each of these locations? So, as you all know, most of Jira data reside in fields. These type might be things like the budget for a feature, or the sprint in which a feature will be shipped, the channels through which a marketing campaign will be run, or maybe a release date of some important feature after represented by a fixed version system field. But also the description of the issue itself, which provides much more detail to the feature, the contract, the marketing campaign, and so on. Now, field level security is currently not available on cloud. There are few apps that provide this feature on server. They're aptly named field level security or field security in Jira. However, they do have their limitations and or require significant changes. I remember this one add-on that required you to change some of the Java libraries on the server or data center instance. So it's good to be wary around these tools. However, while you can't really change field level visibility, you can change field level editability, and we will cover that later. So all of these fields are inside an issue. Now, when someone only sees a value of a field, he might not get all the necessary context. But if he sees an issue, then he has the whole pack, right? The whole context. Issues may contain a lot of sensitive data, be it stories representing features that will be deployed, bug or incident issues that contain data about them, let's say, affecting an application, and may describe weak spots someone may use for a breach as an example. There is, however, issue-level security that you can use to restrict access to certain issues. There's a comment in the chat by Sakina. I want to secure my issues by type if possible. You can absolutely do that by issue level security. and some workflow post-function tinkering, which we will get to later in the webinar. So the way issue level security works is that while a user may see the majority of issues in a project, he might still have restricted access to some of them. You can, for example, set all issue types of the type, let's say, contract, to be visible only to the attorney project role, like a legal project, or issues of type candidate containing a CV to the HR Jira group. I have mentioned another data type that one should be wary of protecting, and those are attachments. Attachments, as in files attached to issues, can contain even more sensitive data than an issue can. Various plans in Word, spreadsheets with salaries, presentations with important data, archives, bank data, personal information. There's a lot of stuff that can be attached to an issue. There are ways of dealing with attachments by either hiding an issue using, for example, permission schemes or field or the issue security schemes. However, if you're on data center or server, the attachments need to be stored somewhere. And that's on the disks that store Jira's home directory. So whenever you're considering uploading attachments to Jira, it might be good to consider not only who has access to an issue, but also to the underlying disks. Now, projects are one step above from issues and attachments. They can contain all issues with a particular theme or a goal. That means the whole HR project or the whole legal project with lots of possibly compromising data, or the entire development project containing a roadmap and features that are waiting to be shipped. Projects as a whole can be easily restricted by permission schemes as they apply to the project as a whole. We will learn about how to use them and their important parts further in the webinar. Lastly, users. Even users can be considered restricted data. Why? Well, because once you visit the user's profile, you can read their email address and their permissions or groups in Jira. So not only can get contact information, but you can see if this is a, let's say, a high profile user that has access to restricted areas, such as the HR project, if he's a member of the HR group, let's say. And such this user can work as a point of attack for a cracker. Also, there might be reasons why you don't want everyone to see what other users are working in your Jira, whatever they may be. User visibility may be restricted by the global permission browse users, which again, we will get to next. So those are the locations where sensitive data can be placed. Let's move on to the use cases next. This part will cover use cases that you can deploy in Jira and which deserve a special consideration first, either from the point of view of who can access them, or what would having such a use case deployed mean for the rest of the application environment. But first, we would like to ask you, which use cases have you encountered that warrant special security requirements? Again, you can write us in chat, so we can perhaps touch upon them a bit later during the webinar. There's a question by Luis. What about Confluence links in Jira? Are they subject to Jira security, Confluence security, or both? Now, a great example of securing these links to other issues or other pages can be found on the Atlassian issue tracker at jira.atlassian.com. I believe most of you know that it's a tracker for various suggestions and bugs that you can find in Atlassian products. And it's basically a public Jira. And there's many links to, let's say, duplicate suggestions or duplicate issues, duplicate bugs. But there's also a large number of links that lead somewhere that the visiting users cannot see. There's often a sentence like authenticate to see this issue or authenticate to see this Confluence page. So this means that unless you're signed in and have the necessary rights, then you cannot view the page or the issue because, well, you don't have the permissions. But you do see that there is some kind of link there, but you don't know where it goes or what exactly the page or the issue is about. So I would say that's managed on the level of each of these restricted issues. There's another comment. Most of companies expect to be able to secure one of issue types, which is not available by default. Well, it is and it isn't. It is if you tinker a bit with the issue security schemes, the post functions. We'll go to that through that topic later, but I agree that it isn't as visible as it could be, but requires you to have some knowledge of the issue security levels. But that's one of the topics that we will go through today. Another one by Nigel, a very specific use case, but we need approvals for some requests, but those approvers are shown on the customer portal. Is it possible to hide these approvers, as those are sometimes high-placed manager that don't want to receive from impatient users, calls from impatient users? That largely matters on which platform are you on, because I believe that on server and data center, there are add-ons that can actually change the styling and with it, what you can see on the customer portal screen. On cloud, I'm not really sure if there's such an add-on because the UI is, well, hard or difficult to work with. But if you're on server or DC, I do believe you can hide parts of this portal. We may talk about it later. If you can send me an email, then we can discuss the problem and see the specifics. And last comment by Charles, we deal with issue type different security exposures as well as security group separations on what all can be seen by all read level groups. All of these topics will be covered in the tools section, the security groups and field security. So maybe that's something you might look forward to. Okay, thank you for the comments. Let's move on. So the first use case are publicly accessible projects and documentation. The most famous example of this being the Atlassian issue tracker. I'm saying documentation, as this case might affect spaces in Confluence too, where you can have publicly facing documentation. A lot of app vendors do this actually, or even publicly facing repositories on Bitbucket. When you deploy a publicly facing project, it means that you are opening your Jira to users without an account. What this means for cloud is that you need to check if only these projects can be accessed, and also that links and boards with these issues will be visible. Again, you can see this on the Atlassian issue tracker, where Atlassian employees or users working in their Jira put some of those public-facing issues into their boards with funny names or just gibberish. It's kind of strange, but you can see it even as a public, outside user. Well, this is not that much of a problem on cloud. However, it becomes a much bigger problem on server and data center, where by opening your Jira to the public, you need to expose it on the internet. It is then advisable to always have at least the latest version of the application so that the security gaps that can be found on the older versions can't be exploited. Another very common use case are HR projects, which may mean, for example, the tracking of candidates and their CVs, management of reviews of employee contracts, their salaries, and various other things also need to have their access restricted. That goes without saying. But also consider that a lot of identifiable personal data, like what can you find in CVs, may be stored there. Some companies have policies of which types of data can you actually put on the company infrastructure, which can be complicated in the case of server and data center, considering who can access the instance and where the servers storing the data are located, but can be even more problematic with cloud, where you would give personal data to a third-party service on third-party servers. So what can you do? Well, first, make sure that the restrictions, as in the Jira restrictions, are airproof. It is good, for example, to use an impersonation app such as User Switcher to log in as a different user and confirm that you can or cannot see the project or solve issues. Many times, a combination of permission schemes, issue security schemes, and the like are used to secure these projects. But also, in the case of enterprise deployments, always have a document approved by all the necessary stakeholders that are responsible for security and the project itself, saying that you can store these types of data on Jira. So you can rely on this document if something goes wrong, because you do need to have these sensitive types of data approved. Well, legal projects are very similar. They may contain document approvals or important contracts that third parties absolutely shouldn't access, or personally identifiable data, documents regarding ongoing disputes or policy changes and trademarks and other information. Licenses and license keys may also be stored there. Again, the restrictions work very similar as in the HR project, on the project level and perhaps even issue level. And again, a document approving the storage of these types of data in your Jira, it's good it's good to have just in case. Development data. Now, this can mean a lot of things. For example, roadmaps or Gantt plans, initiatives, epics, stories that the teams are working on and will deploy or want to deploy, but also the code itself, which would mainly be the case of securing your Bitbucket. All of these are sensitive data and could inflict considerable damage should they were allowed to leak, let's say, to a competing company. In Bitbucket, sometimes the repositories are set as public, for example, to be read by various third-party apps. So if you are storing these types of data, it's good to check who exactly has the access. And while this is mainly a case of IT teams using Jira for system documentation, either by itself or perhaps by connected to Insight or Confluence, that's the storage of credentials and documentations. By credentials, we mean logins, passwords. I mean, these naturally shouldn't be in Jira or Confluence, but in tools like Bitwarden or Vault or KeePass instead. But it happens, so it's good to always keep an eye out for these types of data once they're in your Jira or Confluence. The same goes for system documentation that may cover some of the system's weak spots or information available only to sysadmins like license keys. Again, these are projects and apps that need to be restricted and the access tested by, for example, the user picker app. Another factor to consider is that whenever project containing these types of data appear on your Jira instance, even though you may limit regular users from accessing them, all administrators should be able to access them at any time. If you still have many administrators and haven't reduced their numbers, this might pose a significant problem. And again, we'll talk about mitigating this issue later. So, this isn't an exhaustive list of use cases that deserve special security considerations, but some of the most common ones that Jira is being used for. So a good question to ask at this point then could be, should you store sensitive data in Jira, given what can go wrong? Well, the answer is yes, of course. There are ways to store this data in Jira safely. And in the next part, we'll get to the tools made to help you with this. So let's see what tools you can leverage in Jira to ensure that your data stays safe. Well, most of you know permission schemes. So just to reiterate, permission schemes state who can do what. They contain 38 permissions that can be connected to various groups, project roles, or even single users. Each project has its own permission scheme, and none can exist without it. Now, whatever is stated in the permission scheme applies to all issues in the project. What this means that you cannot set up the permission scheme to only apply to some issues in the project, which in some cases will also be impossible. An upside of the permission scheme is that you can have one scheme connected to multiple projects. So you can set up a template that would work, for example, for all development teams or all service desks. We won't show how to work with permission schemes here. I mean, you can review the documentation for that, but let's see which permissions are some of the most important. Most of the permission schemes are self-explanatory, such as assignable user or create issues. However, let's go through a few that aren't accessible to all users by default, for example, or which can make significant changes should they be set wrong. So the administer project permission is kind of obvious. It tells you who has the means to administer the project the permission schemes is connected to, which means things like renaming the project or changing its schemes. However, it also comes with another permission called extended project administration. This one actually comes up a lot in the Atlassian certification exams, like what is extended project admin? So here goes. This one makes it possible for a user to change workflows and screens in the project, provided that the screens and workflows aren't shared and the statuses or fields already exist. If you want to standardize or keep governance above the changes made in Jira, it is then advisable to remove the extended project administration permission from everyone and let the admins do their work. Users with the browse projects permission can view the project itself. What this means is that everyone else without this permission won't be able to see either the project or its issues. To grant or remove access to a project, you would use this permission. And when you're using just service management projects and want to grant permissions to users to act as agents, there are two steps you need to take, which aren't really as obvious. So first, you need to grant these users the service desk agent permission, which is the permission required by default on all JSM projects. The second setting is to add the users to the service desk team project role. And as you can see, the service desk agent permission is a part of the permission scheme. Now, delete issues, which I have written in bold here, is one of the permissions with which it might even be considered a best practice to remove it from everyone except for the administrators. There's various points of view that support this claim. For example, whenever an issue is deleted in Jira, it cannot be restored unless you restore a backup, which is very cumbersome on any type of instance, be it cloud, server, or data center. Important data may get removed this way and possible audit tracks cleaned. If someone did something he shouldn't have, you will have no chance of discovering it. So it's very important for securing an instance that almost no one has the ability to delete issues. They can be transferred to a trash project or resolved as cancelled instead, for example. Schedule issues is one of the permissions whose usage isn't as apparent as it could be. Schedule issues not only means that you're able to edit the due date field, or also that you're able to rank issues and add them into sprints. So whoever has this permission can then change the contents of your agile projects and sprints. So that's one to remember also. Finally, set issue security enables you to set issue security, obviously. But I want to emphasize it here because only users with print permission can change the issue security. So if you cannot change it, it's because you don't have this permission. This permission also isn't given to anyone by default. It's created empty. So we always need to add even the administrators in this permission. So these are some of the less clear permissions in permission schemes. And while the other permissions are also important, they are much more clear in what they do, as I've said before. So what now? Well, whenever you create a new software or services project, a new permission scheme is created. This might cause an overload of sorts with permission schemes and prevent standardization. A recommended practice would be to create permission schemes that are shared in similar projects. This will prevent cluttering of the admin interface with tens and hundreds of unused permission schemes that are many times identical and help with setting some expectations for everyone working with the projects. Also, if you name these standardized permission schemes intuitively, it will be easier for the admins to assign the right scheme to the right projects. Because an agile development permission scheme is better than a permission scheme for project AB. Like, what's project AB? So, yeah. You cannot put various types of users in a permission scheme, and at first, adding groups and single users there seems very practical. But the problem is that you can hardly standardize with set in stone groups, members of which you won't be able to track easily. Let's say these groups are pulled from let's say, user provisioning software or G Suite or Active Directory, and the users constantly change, so you don't know who is a member of these groups, with the exception of perhaps the admins of the Jira instance, because those will always be the same people, or for the most part. By higher by including the project roles into a permission scheme, you leave to each project's admin to add the right people to the right roles himself, without risk of forgetting who was in each group, which drastically lowers the change of an unauthorized person accessing a project. Finally, it's useful to have several permission schemes just for the work of the admins, like one permission scheme that hides projects for everyone but the admins, again utilizing the browse projects permission, or one scheme that makes the project read-only, so no create issues or edit issues permission, and so on. Moving on to the global permissions. So just like permission schemes, they state who can do what. However, on a more global scale, that's the entirety of your Jira. The difference between global permissions and the permission schemes is that while permission schemes are project specific, global permissions apply to the whole instance, so you can find them in the system section of your Jira administration. The upside of global permission is that there aren't as many settings that you can set globally, so they're fairly easy to remember and learn. Some apps add their own global permissions, such as Tempo. On the other hand, if you set global permissions wrong, they can substantially affect your security. So let's see what you need to know. The Administer Jira global permission, as the title says, allows all users with this global permission to administer the instance. That does not mean, however, that they will have, in case of cloud, access to the billing and subscription settings. That's a level above that. On server and data center, this role was called Jira Administrator and Jira System Administrator. The main difference being that the sysadmin was able to set up configuration even with outside services, like email or user directories, and make large-scale changes like restoring backups. This role should always be had by, let's say, 2 or 3 users maximum on a medium-sized instance, and again, we'll talk about that later. Browse users and groups, I think it's only browse users on server and data center, takes care of the user visibility problem we talked about earlier. Users with this permission can see other users and groups, such as in user picker fields or group picker fields or assignee fields. Usually, this is set up for all users by default that they can see the other users, but that doesn't mean that there might be cases where usability might not be exactly desired. Create team managed project is a cloud-only permission, and it allows all users added to this global permission to create new Jira projects, not only the admins. So if you want to keep a strict governance over who creates which projects, you want to document them at first, have users answer some questions before creating the projects, it might be beneficial to remove users from this setting because they won't be able to create the team managed projects or the so-called next gen projects if they don't have this permission. However, the most important permission that there is next to administer Jira is the bulk change setting or make bulk changes in cloud. This one can actually do some serious damage if assigned wrongly. So what make bulk changes does is that it enables a subset of users to change something on a large number of tickets. What this means is that a large number of tickets can change by mistake or even maliciously, which again could be rolled back perhaps only by restoring a backup. Couple the bulk change global permission with the delete issues project permission, and you can see the possible damage that can happen. We recommend then limiting the bulk change permission only to admin users and let's say power users like team leads or project managers. Both permission schemes and global permissions have good setups right by default. For example, the delete issues permission is restricted only to the administrator's project role. But it doesn't mean the settings will be perfect for all deployments. A good step in making sure that the global permissions are set correctly is to revise the values you have set up there and whether you are happy with the current configuration. This also means understanding what each of the groups on your Jira instance do, because unlike project roles per project, you can only assign groups in global permissions. On cloud, this becomes fairly complicated by the basic administrator groups that are created when you start your instance. So it's good to know the difference between administrators, Jira administrators, and site admins, for example, and even whether you need all three of these groups. As you install various apps, new permissions may appear, which is the case of Tempo, for example. So if something doesn't work in the app, and we're getting back to the structure question here, you might want to check the global permissions first if you have all the necessary rights and if the add-on hasn't added its own permissions to either the permission scheme or the global permissions. Many times we even set permissions on the add-on level or in the objects made from the add-on, like plans from advanced roadmaps and so on. So those are the three places to look if something doesn't work. And issue security. Where issue security helps is when you need to reduce access to issues in a specific project. Yet, you don't want to hide it as a whole. You don't want to hide the entire project. What issue security does is that it puts a select list field on issues in which you can choose a certain level that specifies who can see a particular issue. This is super useful if you, for example, want only members of a particular role or a group to see a certain type of Jira issue, as you've asked in the chat. As an example of use case, in an HR project, any team lead or project manager can raise a request for a certain candidate they need for their team in an issue type like request. I need a new QA tester, create issue, bam. However, once the applicants start rolling in, the HR team might create issues of the type candidate, which would actually contain the candidate's CV, so they can ask them for an interview and do the usual process. However, only the members of the HR team would have the necessary issue security level to see these issues, and then the CVs. So another use case may be having a service desk project without actually having Jira Service Management installed. The default issue security level for all issues then can be reporter and watchers, for example, reporter and watchers, which would mean that only the reporter of the issue and whoever he adds as watchers will see his own issues. And then, of course, the service team. Issue security also has its own schemes that you connect to projects, so it's project specific. And what's also interesting is that issue security isn't set on projects by default when you create them. You need to do several things to successfully implement an issue security scheme. So let's see what they are. First, you would create an issue security scheme. It's quite rare that you would need an issue security scheme template for multiple projects. However, if you do, make sure to name it so that it can easily be reused and recognizable by everyone. For example, by its access levels, like admins, pipe, developers, pipe, rest of users. Then add the mentioned access levels to it that say who can access an issue with a particular issue security level. As you can see, you can add single users, project roles, groups, for example. Then, as issue security levels will apply again to all issues in a project, mark one of these levels as default. This means that when an issue is created, it will get this default security level. Now, this scheme is completed. Now you need to connect it to projects to actually see it in work. It takes a while before you find where it can be switched, and it's in the Issues section of the permission settings. That's on the picture at the up right corner. On the lower right corner, there should have been a picture of a lock with a key, but it's not as important. So, oh well. Well, because the issue security level fields will be put on the project screens for the issues that you need to change it on, this is a fairly interesting point. Because the security level is a field, you can work with it as with any other field, which means search for it, filter by it, but also set it up in post functions. What this means that as the workflow progresses, you might at some point set it up so then in a particular status, the security level changes. So for example, if you want nobody to see your issues before while they're still in preparation, you might choose to set the issue security in the create transition so that upon creation, the issues are hidden to all but the reporter by changing the post function create transition. Finally, you need to add the rate permission that allows users to change the security level, which you can do in the permission scheme. Only the users mentioned here with this permission can change the level, nobody else. And that's how you would deploy the permission scheme. I'm sorry, how you would deploy the issue security scheme. That said, make sure when sharing issue security schemes between projects that you always know who exactly is in each of the roles for each level in every project the scheme is assigned to. Well, field level security isn't a Jira feature, as you cannot change who can see a certain information in the field. There are some apps for server that help with this, as I've said, but there's nothing similar on cloud. Or I think also that's compatible with data center. So how do you then deal with issues such as field visibility or editability? As for viewing or hiding extra fields from certain users, you might use issue security levels and a linked issue or a subtask that will have the necessary field on information, but will be kept hidden because of the issue security. The fact that it might be relevant will stay in the form of it being linked to its parent issue. However, if you need to restrict who can edit a certain field, then the best way to do so would be to remove said field from any edit screens and only make it changeable via a global workflow transition. On this transition, you would add a screen with the field you need to restrict and a condition stating who can change the field. As an extra precaution, you need to restrict who will be able to do a bulk change, as that way the fields can be changed also. Lastly, this is not much of a Jira feature. As a must-have general approach you should utilize when setting up security, and that's switching users. Well, on cloud, it's already a feature, but on server and data center, you still need to add it. So what this means is that whenever setting up a new security measure, such as issue security levels or permission schemes, you should always log under users that will be affected by the change and investigate whether the security measure you have set up works. This might mean, for example, restricted users or the only users that can access a certain feature. On cloud, this feature is available automatically when you, as an admin, view another user's profile. On server or data center, this feature can be accessed via third-party apps, some of which are even free. We have listed the possible tools that are at your disposal that you can use for improving your JS security. Do you have any questions regarding these tools, or perhaps is there a tool that we have forgotten that you regularly use? Please share it with us in the chat. Okay, so question from Igor. Can you show the tools again, please? Absolutely. We will be sending a recording where you can review the tools again. But now, due to time constraints, we should move forward. However, to summarize it, we talked about permission schemes, global permissions, issue security schemes, and some workflow means for field level security. Another question by Michal. So switching user is available out of the box for Jira Cloud. Yes, it absolutely is. If you are an admin of an instance, of a Jira instance, then you need to go to the user profile of the users that you wanna log in under. I think you need all of the admin permissions, like site admins, admins, Jira administrators, to be able to. No, the site admins is the most important because that lets you administer users. And then there's a button that says login as this user. The user will be notified for some reason. That doesn't happen on server and data center, but yeah, at least you can log under him. Do third-party apps store data from your Jira instance as well, data center? So I'm not sure what exactly you mean by the data center edition, but this has been a problem on cloud where most of the add-on data is stored on third-party servers because the apps communicate differently than server apps. So on data center and on server, you would store all the data in your machine. That's also one of the ways why people prefer it, so they can error-proof it from the internet. However, on cloud, the vendors store third-party data. This is being mitigated by the development of the Forge development system that for cloud that should be able to ensure that all the data from apps remain in the same geographical location for data residency, but I'm not really sure how the storing on vendor servers will be managed in Forge. But as is, the app data is stored on other servers or on third-party servers. Right, there's no more questions. So thanks for the comments and questions. And Let's move on. Let's move on to the chapter on establishing governance. Now that we have covered the actual technical tools and means that help with improving security, let's have a look at the, let's say, philosophical approach to achieving a secure Jira instance. And well, the most important part of stabilizing your Jira to the point of it being secure is reducing and vetting the application administrators. You can have the best security practices in the world, but if your administrators aren't trained or managed, the practices will become useless. So it's important to reduce the number of admins to 2 or 3 and run any change through them. This happens very often. Jira might start as a tool in one team, then expands to several teams. These teams, of course, want their administrator rights, then to a whole department, and maybe even further in a large company. The Jira instance just spreads. So suddenly there are critical processes running on that instance, which is actually ran by 20 or 30 administrators. So not a lot of users realize that this is an unacceptable risk for many. These 20 or 30 administrators can access any data they want, make backups of all the data in the instance, or even change critical settings. By reducing the number of administrators to 2 or 3 who process any change through a dedicated change project, you achieve transparent communication, change management, and drastically improve security of your Jira instance, allowing for further improvements such as standardization. This is so that they can easily keep in touch with each other. That's why there are 2 or 3 regarding the application changes and can even hold each other accountable if anything goes wrong. If you want to take back control over the application, this is absolutely necessary. Now, there will always be a pushback if people get their administration permissions taken. Maybe they are afraid that the changes they need will not be processed as fast or they will be forgotten. However, this will get mitigated by another governance tool, and that's implementing proper change management. What change management means in this situation is that someone else takes a look at the issue first and is discuss the possible solutions with the requester instead of letting the user, sometimes even with admin rights, just implement it himself. Well, change management doesn't really even have to be too complicated. It can actually be run in a basic Jira or Jira Service Management project as a help desk. The people that actually approve or decline the changes are usually the actual dedicated administrators, the reduced number, as mentioned in the last point, or other specialists, like the Atlassian product owner. Together, they can evaluate whether the request can be deployed or not, and perhaps suggest other possible solutions. Aside from being a good industry practice by itself, running a change management prevents, for example, users deploying sensitive information on an instance that isn't approved by the company's security team, or adding users to groups that see restricted data. User provisioning, in this case, means that your users are stored somewhere else, such as in Active Directory or in G Suite, instead of Jira's internal directory. This can improve the application security in several ways. First, these services usually have other mechanisms to ensure that only the right user is accessing them, such as two-factor authentication via an app, or password policies, where users constantly change their passwords. This eliminates, to an extent, the situation where an intruder is logging under a user with a stolen password. Two-factor authentication is possible, for example, through Atlassian Access on server or using SAML connections, which are user provisioning service. Server and data center can use tools like Crowd for centralized access, but two-factor authentication, or SSO, can also be achieved by many apps that are on the market fairly easily. So the point is that this not only improves security, but also the convenience of the whole process. When the user leaves, you don't have to disable the user in the user directory, then in Jira, and so on. Third-party apps can also log in through an API token. What this means is that they don't have to log under a regular, easily guessable user password, but through a REST call. These tokens are available for cloud and can also be generated by server or DC by an app. Archiving. So making archiving a part of your governance is another beneficial step for the instance security. This can mean archiving projects, spaces, repositories, and by archiving, we mean removing all data from the instance, storing them in a location that most of the users don't have access to. If you schedule periodical archiving periods, where you evaluate which data is no longer worked on your instance, in case of projects handling sensitive data right after stop being used, perform a backup and remove them. By this, you again avoid a situation where these types of data could leak. As a bonus effect, the instance becomes leaner and easier to administer. There's some few other recommendations here. So something else to consider is public sign-up and what exactly it does with users that sign up on your instance this way. While it might appear as an easy and a quick way to onboard everyone, it also means that when the users are created, they will be handed some kind of access. And this type of access should be the lowest possible because, for example, the default group for users, such as Jira core users or Jira software users, will be used. These users will then have access to all projects that this group can see, which by default is all of them. Jira Service Management, for example, requires you to have public sign-up turned on for users to create accounts and add tickets, but these users are limited to only the services portals. So it might be better to turn off public sign-up if you're not using JSM, and if not, if you need to have it turned on, then know which groups will these users get. You can learn about it in the application access section in Jira. There's like a default group or default group membership. Audit logs. Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket all have audit logs that record system changes. If you still have many admins, something changed and you need to revert it, again, a case for having only a few administrators, the audit log is very valuable. It also monitors suspicious activity and tracks it to the point in time and the person. And nobody can erase these logs. They are deleted themselves after a period of time. A particular interesting app that can improve auditing even more on server and data center is Access Log for Jira, which even shows who accessed which attachment. Lab features let's begin with lab features. So lab features are new application functionalities that are still in beta, but users can try them out anyway. Dark features are settings that are usually disabled by default, and you activate them only if you really know what you're doing and what they do. As an example, one dark feature on server and data center disables the onboarding wizard you see on your first Jira login. However, the thing about lab features and dark features is they're not mature enough to be released, and dark features are so obscure that sometimes even Atlassian won't say what they do. They're like system settings for Atlassian. And they all might pose a security or performance risk if you keep them turned on. Again, this applies mainly to server and DC. And the last one, it's more of a general idea or advice. When an attacker knows that you're an administrator, he will try to get into the account with your name. That makes sense. So it's useful to keep only basic permissions on this account and delegate the admin rights to either a fake or an unrelated user, like I don't know, tester number 7. Keep this account in the internal directory in case the connection to your external user directories would be severed. Then you can log in as your internal admin and recreate the link. Do you have any questions or comments at this point? Or if you don't, what topic would you like to hear about in the next webinar? Let us know in chat. Everyone.
this is it. Thank you for the comments in the chat. Thank you, Camille. I see there are no additional questions. Great. If any questions might occur later, thank you. You can still send them. You will receive all an email with a link to the recording of this webinar. Would you have any additional questions? Feel free, always welcome. Thank you very much all. Thank you, Camille. The floor is yours.
And thank you, Manuel, for listening to today's webinar. We have been Camille Ber and Manuel Patin from Idelco, and you have attended the Securing Jira webinar. We would like to ask for your feedback and criticism. What went well? What would you improve? And again, what topics would you like to hear about next? And even in case that you have trouble with securing Jira, we can also help. You can contact me with your feedback at the provided email, and I will get back to you soon. Any feedback is appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.